This is the reading for Chapter 1, The Origins of American Government. This section will cover two standards. Standards SS.7.C.1.1. Recognize how Enlightenment ideas, including Montesquieu's view of the separation of powers and John Locke's theories related to natural law, and how Locke's social contract influenced the Founding Fathers. And 1.2. Trace the impact that the Magna Carta, English Bill of Rights, Mayflower Compact, and Thomas Paine's Common Sense had on the colonists' view of government. So those are the two standards we're covering in this chapter. So after we read the chapter, we're going to go back and look at these standards and make sure we understand everything that we need to. We've already gone over the vocabulary at the bottom of the page and the words you need to complete. So let's turn the page and look at page 3. To understand the American system of government today, we must actually travel back in a time. We have to return to a colonial period, more than 200 years ago, when the 13 colonies were still ruled by England. What was the Enlightenment? In those times, the people of Europe and America were very impressed by the progress of science. For example, the Englishman Sir Isaac Newton had discovered the laws of gravity. With these laws, Newton was able to calculate both the speed of which a ball fell to the ground and the movements of the planets in space. People were astounded by the discoveries. European thinkers began to apply these same scientific approach in order to understand human society and make it better. They believed there were natural laws. Underline or highlight that word and the rest of the sentence, that governed how people behaved, just as the laws of gravity could be explained how objects moved. So natural laws that governed how people behaved, underline that sentence. Because these thinkers brought the light of reason to everything they studied, their movement became known as the Enlightenment. Enlightened thinkers applied human reason to understand the world. So underline the word enlightenment and the sentence, Enlightenment thinkers applied human reason to understand the world. They criticized traditional authority and superstition. In their place, they proposed the use of reason to make the world a better place. John Locke and social contract. One of the earliest Enlightenment thinkers was another Englishman, John Locke. Locke believed that we were all like blank sheets of paper at birth. Later experiences and education then shape each of us as a person. Differences are actually due to differences in our experiences and education, and not because one of us is better or nobler than another at birth. As an enlightened thinkers like Locke reflected further, they began to question more things. They questioned the special position that nobles and the church held in most European countries at the time. They also questioned the power of kings. Most kings claimed to hold power directly from God, but was this claim reasonable? John Locke didn't think so. He rejected the idea that rulers received their powers from God. Instead, Locke said that rulers received their powers from the people whom they governed. Underline or highlight that sentence. Locke said the rulers received their powers from the people whom they govern, so the people agree to give the power to the ruler. A group of people makes an agreement, known as a social contract, to form a community. Underline or highlight that entire sentence. The definition of social contract, when a group of people make an agreement to form together into a community. This community then makes an agreement with a ruler. Continue to underline until you get to that part of the sentence, because it's not just the people agreeing to form a community, they're agreeing to follow some sort of rules or some ruler, and then the ruler will protect them. The members of the community promise to obey the ruler. In turn, the ruler promises to protect their individual rights. The whole purpose of this social contract, Locke wrote, was to protect these individual rights. Underline or highlight that sentence. The purpose of the social contract, Locke wrote, was to protect these rights. So he believed you form this contract, you work with this government, you agree to follow the rules, but they need to protect your rights. The idea of everyone following the same government is so the government can protect everyone's rights and everyone can live happily. Like most enlightened thinkers, Locke believed in natural law. Underline the word natural law and this following sentence. These were not laws passed by governments, but rules that all societies followed, just like nature followed the laws of gravity. They were based on a common sense, such as the belief that killing or stealing is wrong. Locke believed that natural law guaranteed each of us the right to life, liberty, and the use of our own property. Underline or highlight that last sentence. Locke believed that natural law guaranteed each of us the right to life, liberty, and the use of our own property. Turn the page. If a king or government issued a law that violated natural law, Locke said this law was unjust. Locke thought that people should not obey such unjust laws. If a ruler repeatedly violated natural law, then his subjects even had the right to overthrow him. This, in fact, happened at the time that Locke was writing. King James II of England was very unpopular. He threatened many traditional rights. In 1688, leading members of the English Parliament overthrew him. The following year, Locke wrote a book to justify their actions. Locke explained that a government was established by a social contract between a ruler and his people. If a ruler, like King James II, repeatedly violated this contract, then the people had the right to rebel and overthrow him. So it's an agreement not just for the people to follow the ruler, but for the ruler to take care of the people. That's the social contract. So look at these pictures below. The one on the left was the divine right theory. So that's what the idea they used to have. And that was that God gave the power to pick a king and gave him the power, and then the king had all the power over the people. That was the old way. And then you have Locke's theory of social contract, where one, people agree to cooperate as a community. So they agree to all get together and work together as a community. The community agrees to obey the ruler. And then finally, the ruler agrees to respect the individual rights and protect the community. So this is what Locke wanted. You have on the left side, the way it used to be, and on the right side, the way Locke wanted it to be with a social contract. Now, where it says the active citizen in this box right below here, I want you to put a big number 1 next to it, labeling it as number 1, because at the assignment on this, you're going to have to write the numbers on a sheet of paper and answer these questions. So put a number 1 next to the active citizen box.
John Locke is the father of classical liberalism. His core political ideas and doctrines are really at the heart of constitutional law and Anglo-American jurisprudence.
British philosopher John Locke was born on August 29, 1632, in the county of Somerset, England. After attending schools in London and Oxford, he received his Masters of Arts from the prestigious Christ College.
In 1668, he was elected into the Royal Society, where he studied medicine and graduated as a physician in 1684.
While Locke was studying medicine, he met Anthony Ashley Cooper, who persuaded Locke to move to London and be his personal physician.
Alone.
Lord Ashley. After what later became known as the Glorious Revolution of 1688, Locke returned to England and published 2 treatises of civil government, which became one of history's most famous works on social contract theory.
John Locke introduced the idea of personal sovereignty. He said that each human being should have powers of self-determination.
Locke rejected divine rights of kings theory. Instead, he argued that God gave rights to individuals against the government, not that God gave the king power.
John Locke was an intellectual hero for the American founding fathers. In particular, James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, and Alexander Hamilton.
In his later years, John Locke wrote other important works promoting religious tolerance and new approaches to education. John Locke died at the age of 72 on October 28, 1704, in Essex, England.
Locke's legacy that he defines our political vocabulary to this day. We still talk endlessly about individual rights and natural rights, about limited government, and the separation of church and state.
Baron de Montesquieu and the separation of powers. Another Enlightenment thinker who wrote about government was a French nobleman, Baron Charles de Montesquieu. Montesquieu studied government in several countries and drew comparisons. He thought, for example, that different sorts of government worked better in different countries because of their size. Switzerland was so small, it could be a democracy in which every citizen helped make decisions. But Russia was so large that all the power had to be placed in the hands of an absolute ruler. Montesquieu also came up with his idea of the separation of powers. He thought the government of England was especially successful because one body, the Parliament, made laws, a second branch of government, the king, enforced the laws, and a third branch, the English courts, interpreted and applied the laws. So either circle that whole paragraph or highlight the whole paragraph, but Montesquieu came up with the idea of separation of powers, and it's the three branches, which we've covered many times: the executive, the legislative, and the judicial branch. So, on the next page, Montesquieu concluded that it was best to divide the powers of government into three parts. The legislative branch makes the laws, the executive branch executes or carries out the laws, and the judicial branch interprets the laws and makes rules on their application to specific cases. Montesquieu thought that this separation of powers was good because it kept the government leaders from becoming too powerful or dictatorial, which would have been like a dictator. Each branch depended on the cooperation of the other branches. So again, they have a little picture at the bottom. On the left-hand side, you see it says unitary power, which means, one. And all the power of the ruler, so the one guy has the power to do everything, makes the laws, enforces the laws, and judges them. And then you have Montesquieu's separation of powers on the right, where there's one branch, the legislative, which makes laws, another group, executive, which enforces laws, and then another group, the judicial, which judges how the laws, if they're being applied properly. So you have unitary on the left, where one person has all the power, and then Montesquieu's idea of separation of powers on the right.
Montesquieu's father died in 713 and he was put under his uncle's care in 1716. His uncle died and left barren his fortune. Montesquieu was left with the title of president of the Bordeaux Parliament. He became a member of the French Academy of Sciences. He studied government and lifestyle of the people. He then mixed average lifestyle with his ideas to form a style of government that would work best. Montesquieu understood there were three types of government: monarchy, republic, and despotism. He thought that if the people elected the government, it would be the most efficient, and that the success of a democracy depended on balance and separation of power. According to Montesquieu, the government would have the power balanced throughout three groups of officials, just like England, who divided power between the king, parliament, and judges. Montesquieu said each branch would have equal but different powers so that the branches wouldn't have too much pressure or authority. If two branches disagreed with a third party, they could overrule that third party. But Montesquieu did not carry these ideas onto the people as a whole. He approved of slavery and thought that women were weaker than men, but that women had the ability to govern. Montesquieu's idea of the separation of powers was carried onto the Constitution, which is the foundation of America.